And let's go. Welcome, everybody, to the Killadelphia Sessions, Part 2. I'm Dan, your host, with Jennifer. Comics Will Break Your Heart on YouTube. Comic Books Will Break Your Heart on Instagram. And our guest panelist, Dee, from FTO Nerd Talk, making his first appearance with us. And our guest of honor, writer of TV, showrunner, Rodney Barnes.
Hey, this reminds me how badly I need a haircut. Like, whenever I see, like,
here in quarantine,
it has been, and I'm afraid to go outside, and even to have the barber come here, it still feels like danger. So that's all.
There was a month or two that Florida was shut down that I got like bad hair.
Month that Florida actually shut down. I've been in Oregon and shut down for like 10. I've been here for like 10 months shut down in Oregon, and you're like, yeah, that like 1 month we were shut down.
It was traumatic.
Jennifer does look like she's in a really great bunker. Just surrounded by comic books, like in a panic room full of comic books. That's what I would have if
got nothing to worry about.
It's a 400 square foot apartment that is filled, like, the amount of the comics that I have behind me. I have an equivalent of like short and long boxes. I'm pointing them to over there because they're in my 400 square foot apartment. And then I've got just as many books over there too. So like when that happens, yeah, I'll be here. I'll be your media source.
I actually admire that. That's
come on beautiful. Over.
Yeah, hey, if we ever go outside, if we're ever allowed to go outside, I'm down. Yeah.
Well, her bookcase almost killed her back a couple of weeks ago.
It did. Comics will break your back.
That's nice. I like that.
Yes, they will. Yes, they will. Not just your heart, but your back as well.
So, Rodney, before we start talking about Killadelphia, the book, tell us a little bit about what you've got going on with Zombie Love and your company you started and what's going on with that.
Oh, man. Zombie Love Studios decided to start a comic book company. There were stories I wanted to tell that I didn't want to have to pitch or to alter in a very specific way that editors sometimes at publishing houses ask you to do. And it seemed like it was a simple task when this idea hit me, and I've come to find that it's a little bit more. There's a little bit more to it than just wanting to do it. So, been working hard for the last 6 months to put it all together, and we've got 3 series coming out hopefully by the end of this year. The first is a modern retelling of Blackula. I got the rights from MGM.
Oh, nice.
And I'll be redoing Blackula in my special way.
So you're gonna have a character named Al Sucka inside there as well.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. That's from Coal Chef. That's from one of the Philadelphia.
Yeah. It's stuck with me.
Yes, that is a good one. But yeah, so it's just it was a handful of stories that I really, really wanted to tell. That I just wanted to do it my way. I won't be doing floppies. It'll just be soft cover trades and hard cover trades.
Nice.
And I got to scratch that itch and get it done.
Yeah, people excited.
You got people happy about this, man. Like I read your book. It was really intense, man. Like it had me going for a good while. Like you put a lot of heart and soul inside of this. How long have you been working on it?
It's funny when people ask. I think we talked about it the last time that it's been in my head since I was a kid, and it sort of evolved. It's like that that one dream story. If anyone were to ask you, if you could do anything, what would you do? And it's the one that you kind of roll around in your head, and it's evolved over the years, and it sort of landed where it is, and it's still evolving as we go and try to challenge Jason, and Jason challenges me for sure, and trying to continue to up the ante with the stakes, no pun intended, not just the ones that go in the hearts of the undead, but the stakes of the story, and to keep it, you never know what you're going to get from month to month. I usually write from a themed place more so than just plot, so I try to make each issue feel like it's the same. It's a continuation of the prior story, but it feels different thematically, especially if I decide to focus on one particular vampire and their backstory. It could be a completely like Toppy's story when he was in the Midwest.
Came out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's like those types of stories that I sort of dig. I wanted to, vampires are tough because really all they want to do is suck blood. That's sort of over the course of history, to lesser or greater degrees, that's been their goal. And I wanted to do a story about trauma and how time doesn't necessarily heal all wounds. And it's sort of, there's an action that has to take place as well. So to lesser or greater degrees, every character has something they're wrestling with personally, and being a member of the undead doesn't absolve one of one's emotional issues. So every character is wrestling with their past and trying to look for an answer in the present.
I have a question. I don't know if you can answer it because I don't know if you're NDA'd. The Killadelphia pilot script. How's the progress on that?
Oh, where is it? I'm roughly.
It's just like somewhere around
it was
there.
Here. I just turned in another
sneak
draft.
A peek.
I just turned in another draft last night. I've written roughly 50 drafts of it, and I'm very proud of it. Very happy with it, and hopefully, it's there sooner rather than later. I have to write a show Bible as well, but hopefully we'll be sending it out to all towards the middle to the end of February to networks and.
Since you are talking about it. Like, how different are the characters' tones from the comic book that you wrote in these drafts?
Tonally, they're very, very similar. I think the opportunity with the difference between television and comic books is the pace is a little bit slower. And, since my deal is at HBO, and HBO sort of has a detailed way that they tell stories, that's sort of what I'm going for, to really dig into who these characters are and why they want what they want and what motivates them, again, beyond the desire just for blood or to heal family issues and interpersonal issues. It's a methodical pace. If you think about shows like The Walking Dead, where you have the comic book, but they go where they have to go as a TV show, they are separate things, even though they are connected, and there is some degree of familiarity. You'll be able to look at the show and tell that it's inspired by the book, but
with a lot of liberties added to it.
Yeah, a lot of liberties, different new characters that have to sort of populate the world of Philadelphia. But I dig it. I'm very, very happy with the way that it came out.
Do you have people in mind when you're writing it of who you'd like to play the characters? You just take that out of your head and just...
Yeah, most of them have the script right now, so I can't say their names. But so
is one Phil Morris? Because like senior reminds me a lot of Phil Morris.
That's because I believe that's a Jason question, but I believe Mr. Morris has been one of our models for
that's so
for
cool.
how Jason does what he does. So cool. Yeah, so,
I really hope that your daughter can make an appearance, because I know when we talked last time, you said your daughter was kind of the
she would be so happy every time. Like there's a picture in issue 12 where poor
the
Mittens,
cat in her mouth.
Yeah, poor Mittens, and then poor Ellie.
Yeah.
and I showed her, and she was like, "Oh, that's so cool! I wish I could do that." And,
Sorry, guys.
oh, it's okay. So I would love for her to be able to rip my head off like she does. And one of the issues, I think it was 5 or 6, but yeah, that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I saw that Jason posted on Twitter the art from issue 12 where he's like, well, Ronnie's a huge fan of Swamp Thing, so I did the most John Toddlebaum picture I could.
Mm-hmm. We as we all know, you know, Jason and I have a love-hate relationship, and in those moments of clarity when the love is sort of, you know, we're getting close to I was about to say Halloween, Valentine's Day, and so we're trying to bond, you know, and so every once in a while he'll ask me, you know, about inspirations. What does this look like to you? You know, when he's trying to like have me not be pissed off. And so, as everyone knows, I'm a huge Swamp Thing fan, and Down Amongst the Dead Men is my favorite issue, where Swamp Thing has to go to hell to get Abby's soul back. And the way that Bissett and Totalbin, their version of, and Alan Moore as well, their version of hell just was like, as a kid, it really, really moved me. And so sort of an homage to them.
Was he still irritated doing Elysium Gardens? Because I remember you saying that he was pushing back against doing it when you were first pitching it to him.
He's always pushing back. That's the nature of Jason. He's a problematic person. He's very, very difficult to work with, that Jason Sean Alexander. Once he's in it, Jason is great. Getting him to sign on is always difficult. And I find myself, it's almost like he made a decision after the 5th time I've asked, but I have to ask 5 more times, which annoys me. But it wasn't as difficult towards the end. He started to dig it. And then when Mr. Sienkiewicz came along and helped towards the end, I think that also made it a little bit easier.
Sienkiewicz's covers were amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like Jason stepped his game up too, because some of the covers also.
Yeah, he's very competitive. He always, anytime, like, you know, like that Scotty Young cover, or anytime we get a hot cover, Jason's, you know, I know he's competing. He may not admit it out loud, but he's competing. He's trying to. I love his issue 12 cover.
It was incredible.
I'm looking at my spinner rack. But yeah, there you go.
Well,
there you go.
Right.
I dig his Abigail cover. It's one of my favorites.
It's beautiful. Like it's mysterious and macabre, but it's very beautiful. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I do.
You talked about tones in the comics. You talked about tones that you have set for this whole series. Does each issue have its own tone, or like is it like the whole series has like its own tone?
It goes back again to theme. I think the theme sort of dictates the tone. There's always going to be some degree of violence, because there's some folks who think nothing happens unless an arm is getting ripped off. So I always want to please those people. But tonally, when it comes to, for instance, Seesaw and his grandmother, when they get together, sometimes that's the place that I'm going to, where I'm trying to find a healing, hopeful type thing. And then there are times when, like when Toppy was in Deadwood, when it's about anger, and how anger is something that once you're infected with it, it's a tough one to get rid of. And so tonally, from a narrative place, you know, it's according to what story I'm thinking about telling.
And does that theme like follow over into Elysium Garden?
No, I try to separate those two. One of the things that I wanted to do with that was for it to feel like it was its own thing. They're coming from different places. It's like, because of the history of America and the uniqueness of America in the Western world, a lot of the characters have dealt with, you know, Abigail with patriarchy, our black vampires with slavery, or, you know, different issues that they've had to deal with over time. Whereas these guys in Elysium Gardens, they were kings. They were like, they were free. They only knew a world where they sort of, they don't even really understand completely the world that we're in, and they're trying to adjust emotionally to the idea of subjugation. So it's coming from a completely different entry point emotionally for them, and they've become emotionally connected to the idea of freedom for the culture and people in general. Whereas, our other, it's true, John. It's a tough one. One I've had to wrestle with that Jason brings out of me from time to time. But yeah, so it's different entry points for both series, and there are a lot of different. I can't give that away. Let's just say, I have to catch myself from time to time. You guys have a way of disarming me, and I want to tell you things, and then I can't just tell you things. But for any entity or monster, for lack of a better word, that comes into the series, they aren't there just to be there. They aren't there to, wouldn't it be cool to have werewolves and vampires? They sort of they all sort of fit in a big puzzle of what it means to be a person, what it means to be a human being, and all of the various things that we have to wrestle with in human history and all of that kind of stuff.
Jennifer?
Can I just say, seriously though, what better person to kind of talk about this like liberating freedom of their people than, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like using Angela Davis in Elysium Gardens. I saw that woman and I'm like, that is Angela Davis. I screamed, and Angela Davis has taught me so much, and to like see her as this character that through history we get to see this in Elysium Gardens, like that was amazing. And I just want to say thank you for that, because I absolutely love Angela Davis.
You're very welcome. I mean, I think for me, I've always looked at genre as a way to sort of explore various themes. I'm a big fan of John Carpenter, George Romero, Wes Craven. All of that period of horror was where I sort of was indoctrinated into horror. And they took genre and they turned it on its head, and they spoke to white flight, problems in the suburbs, a myriad of issues. And so for me, I heard Angela Davis speak Georgetown and other Black Panthers and folks. And my thing was always to be able to speak to, you're going to have like the Judas and the Black Messiah, I think it is right now. And you're going to have films about the Black Panthers and those types of folks from history. But giving them the same treatment that I do with John Adams and Abigail in Killadelphia, and being able to speak to the pain that they've endured in a different type of way, in a genre type of way, while still respecting, the struggle and the role that folks like that played in the struggle. To me, that's the thing that's sort of, it's fun, but it's also a different way of looking at, the impact of who these folks are or were all.
I can definitely tell, because I feel like in that respect, like there's a responsibility, because these people that are being portrayed, Angela Davis is still alive, but when it comes to like Abigail Adams and John Adams and Sally Hemmings as well, like these were living, breathing people. Angela Davis still is. So like, what's the responsibility that you owe to them, but what's the responsibility to like the story, and not just put them on a pedestal?
And that's the thing, to humanize. Oftentimes we canonize folks in history that we see them one way. Like at one time, Columbus was seen as a hero, and now it's more of a problematic part of history. I face the same thing when I'm doing a mini series about Tiger Woods, and I appreciate Tiger, and he has they're difficult. They're highs and lows. And you never want to make them so high or so low that you're not dealing with a person anymore. And with the Lakers show, is a similar thing to where you're dealing with your heroes, but you still have to add a dimension to them that's honest. And sometimes that honesty can put you in a place that, could be problematic to the public as well. So you're walking a fine line when you're dealing with real people. I remember in the beginning, there were some folks who, like John Adams, why are you making light of, and I'm like, wait to see it first. Wait to see what I do, before you critique it.
Yeah.
And that's why in certain points in like issue 3 of Killadelphia, when I get into John Adams's background, I sort of take a bridge from what's real to the world that I'm putting together. And so there's always a degree of respect that's there, even though genre is connected to it. Sort of like the way Stephen King did 11/22/63.
Yeah.
It's like you're dealing with history, you're dealing with Lee Harvey Oswald and John F. Kennedy and all of those characters, but you're also making a larger statement about their significance, but you're doing it through genre.
I really loved in the first issue of this arc, Abigail telling her story about Jupiter.
Mm-hmm.
And when she's talking about John wanted to make nice with his enemies, bunch of bullshitters. I have no use for bullshitters. And just kind of like, she's like, well, I'm going to get the slave. And Jason kills the look on John's face.
Mm-hmm.
And then right after that, Toppy starts insulting her husband.
Yeah.
And she's like, he's a great man, and pushes him. She's like, I will end you. And just seeing the way she can turn, where she's like, I can make fun of him and tell what a weak man he is, but you will not.
And I wanted to give Abigail some time to kind of grow on us and to really get to know her. It's easy sometimes to make like a big bad. You just immediately, they do badass stuff coming out of the gate, but you never humanize. You never show what you're speaking to right now, the emotions that are under there. There's a reason why, and she believes in, her cause and why she's doing what she's doing. And I never wanted it to feel like, I'm sort of pandering to the idea of, oh, I've got this female character and I've got to make her, a badass. I wanted her to naturally be who she is for the story that I'm trying to tell. And that sort of takes time and patience. And when she does stuff that's badass, I want it to be earned and I want it to feel real. And so
she's very multifaceted. Like you when you first see her, she's actually wearing like a collar with a chain attached to it, and she kind of like changes her tone constantly throughout this story. Like she becomes an alpha. She becomes like a kind of a scout in a way, like, and sees things through. She also has John's back, even though she openly says she doesn't agree with him numerous of times. It's very multi-layered when it comes to her character. Like you really executed her well.
Thank you very much. I think that there are people who, if I have any empathy for Abigail and even our characters who were slaves at one time, you learn how to survive. You learn how to think nimbly. You learn how to, when you're in difficult circumstances, when to step up, when to lower the temperature, when to, to raise the temperature. And it's almost instinctual. It's sort of like when the cop pulls you over, to put your hands on the thing, what to do to stay alive. And I think Abigail sort of embodies that. And the third arc, I think, will speak a lot to a lot of things that have been building over time in her that John's return sort of stokes. So.
Thank you for that message at the end of the issue, saying, I know this looks like a hasty ending, but just too much. Because I literally was like, oh no, it's not the end, son of a bitch. And I was like, oh,
you got me with that. You got me with that, definitely. I thought it was over, but I'm glad it wasn't. Honestly, it felt like six issues, but it went on pretty hard.
Yeah, no, it's not over. It's just one of those things where it's the Empire Strikes Back version of ending on a cliffhanger. Then there's, it's 6 issues. I'm sorry, this is the best we could do. So try to, again, find a comfortable medium where you're respecting the reader for their time and their patience and still trying to deliver a satisfying story. But I always knew this one would bleed into the next story arc because it was Jupiter's story took up so much space that I knew that there was no way to really, like in the first arc, where the Sangsters sort of found a happy place, by the end of the first story arc. I knew there was too much here to be able to do that in 6 issues. So
with Tevin and Topsy and all those characters, like you kind of like have to flesh them up because they're very important to the story. I agree.
And there's so many. It's like, again, if you don't give each one an opportunity to shine, they really are just vampires doing bad things.
Agreed.
If you don't add layers to them, and that the way it's sort of shaken out at this point is there's an A story and there's a B story. Like we're continuing on what's happening on the streets of Philadelphia, but we're getting to know someone that seemingly was just in the background, like Brittany's character.
Right. God, her story. Good God.
Mommy Abigail.
God.
Yeah, yes. And, she's 200 years old, but she has a story. She has a sister. She has, a lot of stuff there. And again, it's almost like in Anne Rice's books. It's like you want to get to know.
I honestly felt that, yes.
Yeah, you want to get to know Louis. You want to get to know all of the different, Armand and all of the different vampires from that world. And you can only do that. She's got how many, like 9 books or more, with the Vampire Chronicles. And you sort of in our space, and I've only got 20 pages, 22, but 20 now, Jason. Because you've only got that amount of time to be able to really establish who these folks are, and while still keeping a certain pacing going. And then I wanted to introduce the netherworld of heaven, hell, and purgatory, and would like to be able to continuously go back there and set up some stakes there as well.
Was it a conscious effort to make everyone know what an asshole Thomas Jefferson was?
It's funny because Jefferson has more charisma, if history is correct, than a lot of those guys. And it seems like over time, the ones that we remember or that we've sort of canonized were really the more charismatic ones, even though the other ones that we don't think of did a lot of the heavy lifting. And I look at Jefferson as being one of those characters. So, having him be a part of our little vampire tale should be fun as well.
Is he coming back?
His eyes turn yellow.
I have to ask.
His eyes were yellow, and someone bit him, so there's a good possibility.
I swear if Hamilton comes back.
You put that in there, too. You put the Hamilton story inside of that. That's really cool. I really appreciated that.
I'm a huge, as folks, those who know me know, I'm a huge Hamilton fan. 23 times I've seen that play. So, not including the Disney Channel. I don't include that. I don't include, even though my kids will say, "Daddy, really?" They hear the music, and I'm like, "Just mind your business." But yes, many, many times for Hamilton.
I do have to say, as I love history, and one of the it's funny because Dan and I have talked about it a little bit, this relationship that because for a very long time I thought that I actually really liked Thomas Jefferson. I looked up to him, and I think as you go a little bit deeper, me personally, I don't think that he was a very great person. And taking a look at his relationship with Sally Hemmings, I'm really glad that you put Sally Hemmings into the book. So seeing his relationship with her, I'm curious to see how that will play out, knowing what their relationship was like, and even Abigail Adams' relationship with Sally Hemmings. So I actually like Sally Hemmings' books.
Wow. Okay. All right. Yeah, for real.
For real. I wrote a comic book about Sally Hemmings that is nowhere to be seen. But yeah, I'm really deep into that.
Now I've got the pressure on me now.
Yeah.
To make sure that I do start. All I can say about her without giving anything away is it's funny how characters who didn't have power in their day, and a lot of their decision making was guided by being powerless and again survival. Now, when you're immortal and you have perspective and power, and you've had 200 years to sort of purge yourself of some aspects of, I believe when what happens oftentimes is low self-esteem accompanies oppression. Even when the oppression stops, the mental job that it does on you, it's difficult to purge that. That's another thing our vampires are dealing with as well. And so to see who Sally Hemmings, today's version of her, juxtaposed to back when she was, enslaved, that should be interesting.
I'm reading this book called The Maroon by a guy named Derek Lipscomb, and he has this story that takes place in the 1800s. It's about this biracial Native American black man who is stopping these mythical creatures. And whenever I read this story, I keep thinking about Killadelphia and what you just said about like these historical figures. Like you put Thomas Jefferson, you put John Adams and his wife inside of this story. Are we going to see any more historical figures inside like the stories of Killadelphia?
I can't.
Like Harry Tubman, Sacagawea, characters like.
It won't be a surprise if you see it pop up. And I told you that they're going to pop up. I can't. You say, "Oh my God, Muhammad Ali!" But wait a minute.
Oh my goodness.
He's boxing vampire. Where'd that come from? So yeah, I can't tell you. I can tell you that history will always play a part of the book and the series, that it will always draw from history. And that came from, you hear a lot, especially when you talk about racism, that history, when people say it came from slavery, and it's like, oh, that was so long ago, how does that connect with today? And I've always felt that, yesterday connects with today. And telling the story of how those two come together is sort of the math of what Killadelphia is. It's always saying that, and the choice of even Philadelphia, because it's such it's sort of steeped in history, and it represents a lot of that idea of 1776 and red, white, and blue, and the Liberty Bell and all of that cool stuff. But it's also got the homicide rate is out of this world, and there are areas like the Badlands where heroin use, they don't even have cops coming to check out what's going on in the area. It's so bad. It's funny being on Twitter. When you put in Killadelphia, you don't just get, when you do a search, you don't just get like the comic book. You get people talking about how bad Philadelphia is. You get people talking, complaining to the mayor, and Meek Mill songs, and you get a lot of talk about the homicide rate and a lot of the issues the city's going through. So if you look at those two things, the idea of something that should be idealistic when you think about it, the past and the history and all of that, and then you look at the present day circumstances that these folks are enduring, and you put those two together, it sort of works. Only Washington D.C. would be probably more appropriate, but that's so gentrified at this point that you've got, it's a different thing.
There was a weird moment. Jen and I were reviewing that week one of the issues. It might have been 10 or 11, and it was where the vampires are storming the streets basically. And in Philadelphia at the time, that same week, there was something going on with people storming the streets. So we're like, wow, this is weirdly prescient. Like at this moment.
Yeah, because even with COVID, it sort of played out like it was a virus, in the beginning, that the vampire horde was
Yellow fever
playing out like a virus, and then it got into those idea of the Black Lives Matter scenario around the time that I think you're talking about. So there's been some stuff that's paralleled, certainly with the book, the tracking of the book to real life.
Also, when you mentioned the charismatic leaders, I just thought back because Jen and I do a show on Dune, and Frank Herbert, basically Dune was his reaction to John F. Kennedy, of how charismatic leaders were bad.
Wow.
He hated JFK.
This is sort of there are parallels. I think for me, sort of how not necessarily the whitewashing of history, but oftentimes there's no context that's given to it. And again, you don't see, like when we're talking about Sally Hemmings, how she felt. We kind of get the idea of just what, unless you're reading those books that you have, what you're taught in school is pretty straightforward. I never heard of Sally Hemmings until, after school and independent study. But being able to humanize those folks and give them emotions and, and all of that stuff is that's the fun.
I could literally talk for an hour about Sally and longer about Sally Hemmings than that, but.
Me too. I usually do a deep dive into who these people were so that I can walk that walk. There's a math to it. There's truth, and then all of a sudden there's this bridge to, magic stuff happens, and then I just go off and start doing what I do. But I always try to reference something that really happened, something they really said. I try to get the dates right. I try to, the geography. They were here during this period of time, and this incident happened, and then to sort of blend it in. So twistery, I think they call it.
Actually,
twistery,
fact check
I like
a lot
that.
of it. Like you're dead on so much.
I try. One guy got on me about in Toppy's story. There was a battle of something, and he said no, that was actually called the blah blah blah, and he went and sent me this long thing that I didn't look at, but he said it was actually this, and the thing I was talking about happened a week before, and I was like, okay, you win. So what about the vampire? Were any of them vampires during that period of time? The vampire thing's really going to bother. So,
I'm not going to lie. I had a moment like that because of Sally Hemmings and because when Sally Hemmings and Abigail Adams meet.
I get inboxed this.
There's actually like only a couple of letters where Abigail Adams historically talks about Sally Hemmings, and in them basically Abigail Adams is saying like, who is this little girl? Like she's this like 13-14-year-old girl, and she is just kind of aloof, and that's the way that Abigail Adams talks to her. So there was moments, I think I told Dan, I'm like, Abigail Adams hated Sally Hemmings. Like that's where my suspension of disbelief ended for me. Like I can have a story about vampires and werewolves, but
this Abigail is a vampire, so she's going to be interested in her just for blood. So it's going to make that relationship get a little bit closer. I saw that too, and it was two things that jumped out at me. One was, for them to have the relationship that I sort of come up with, Abigail would have to be a pedophile if I made her 13 or 14 years old.
Right.
And it wouldn't be as interesting to me if I aged one up a little bit and softened one a little bit in order to make it happen to fit this story. So, yes, I saw that as well. But really what I needed was for one to know the other. That's really all I needed, was for them to have crossed paths at some point in history in order to make the math of them get together. And it was, and most of it came from Adams trying to make peace with Jefferson. And so I figured if Adams is trying to make peace with Jefferson, that would bring Abigail into the same space as Adams, and Sally Hemmings is there. And so all of them would be mixed in the same space. Couldn't do the same thing with George Washington or some of the others that are there because they didn't have they weren't in the same proximity.
Right.
So as long as it's there, I can kind of live with myself with taking creative license to go in different directions.
It was pretty seamless too.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
You're from Annapolis.
I am.
You went to was it Harvard University?
I did. I went to Howard.
Howard University.
Yes.
And you wrote a story about Philadelphia. You wrote a story about like the founding fathers. Like why Philly? Why not someplace like Minneapolis? Not someplace like New York? Why pick Philadelphia for the story?
Well, again, it sort of represents a lot like Annapolis, Maryland. Annapolis, Maryland was the capital of the 13 colonies at one time, and I grew up with those cobblestone streets and a lot of colonial. It still looks and resembles colonial America. That's the quaintness of Annapolis, Maryland. And originally, I thought about setting it there as like an homage to my hometown. But I wouldn't have been able to get the grittiness of the street. And as I was saying before, when you look at the historical significance of Philadelphia and, the landmarks and all of that stuff, juxtaposed to the homicide rate and the sociological issues that they're enduring, to me, it fit that idea of history, but also the present and how those two have influenced one another. The idea, I remember when I was in the Boy Scouts. Yes, I was a horrible Boy Scout too. I remember they made me a troop leader, and I forgot to bring like some of the supplies on the camp out, and we got stuck in the rain. I was a horrible scout. But we went to Philadelphia, and I remember they took us to the Liberty Bell, and they took us to all of this, all of the historical stuff, and it was like, wow, this is a big deal. And then I remember seeing like they had 20 murders in a weekend, like as soon as I got home on the news. And it was like putting those two together in my head was something interesting about, the idea of America and the reality of America.
You can make those deaths, those murders just be whatever you wanted it to. And why not have it be a vampire story? No, I get it.
Yeah. It's kind of like what The Wire did for Baltimore, where people didn't know what the fuck was going on over there. And all of a sudden, like The Wire came out and people were like, it can't be. Holy shit, it is.
Yeah. And I mean, what David Simon really, the beauty of what The Wire was to show not so much just the drug dealing, but the problematic nature of the city government and how all of those layers influence the people, the government, the school system, poverty, how it all sort of mixes into this stew that never seems to cool down. Like it's always, no matter who you put in as mayor, no matter who you put in as police chief, there's a math that's going on in the city that keeps the problem sort of the same. And, that's what I thought The Wire did a great job at doing.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up issue 8, the James Sr. meeting with Gloria in the afterlife. Broke my fucking heart. Like, ripped it out of my chest, and luckily it ends in a way I'm like, okay, I'm alleviated a little bit when he's like, this better be fucking good.
This better be good.
Yeah, I mean, I knew from the beginning that would be, how after issue 6 of how do you bring him back? How do you bring him back in a way that feels authentic? Again, following the family dynamic of they make peace, but Jimmy really isn't in a position to take his dad's spot yet. And it's sort of like your kids coming home, like they aren't ready to be adults quite yet. And I wanted to play into that a little bit where he still needs his father. He still has some growing to do, some stuff to figure out, and they need each other still. And
it's just he got his happy ending. Like him and his wife made peace. She's like, "Stay with me," and then he's pulled back. It's just like, oh god, like
yeah.
You gave me chills in that. Like when he told his son to grow the fuck up. And like he threw the glass on the ground like that literally gave me chills because like he's telling his son to grow up, but like he's not grown up because Senior didn't do a good enough job of raising his son.
And that's the again, this is all based on my relationship with my father and my son's relationship with me and my relationship to both of them. Those frustrations. And you don't see a lot of, like black fathers and sons and those stories. Typically you get mom and child. You don't typically get father and child. And mine was so, both beautiful and problematic at the same time that I wanted to be able to, from a cathartic place, explore some of the difficulties that come with loving someone, but then also having issues with that person at the same time. To me, it humanized both of them. They still have a task. They've got to stop this vampire thing from happening.
That's what keeps them going, it seems like.
Yeah, but they still have to figure out how they're going to be able to find mutual respect. They have love, but how are they going to find that sweet spot that, will find a groove for each other? So
the Amazonian vampires, you don't have to answer this, but big part coming up, or are they just going to be in the background?
Big part coming up.
Okay.
there's another element to this that, man, I wish I could tell you, but
well, the fact they brought Jefferson.
It has a lot to do with time, and they have their own history. The Amazonians do, as far as how time has played a part in why they're doing what they do, what they mean to human history, and it's far different from the Killadelphia world of the Adams and whoever. But why they choose who they choose and what their ultimate goal is, that's for stories to come.
And Angela and the werewolves heading to Philadelphia, are they going to cross with some of our people?
It's possible. It's highly possible. It is highly possible that, two creatures of the night with a similar temperament will at some point cross paths with one another. Who knows? Who knows?
Can I throw a suggestion out?
Go for
it. We see Angela and her meeting Malcolm X in the 60s, and their plan is ultimately to go to Philadelphia. So they're already probably established in Philadelphia, and they're watching this whole thing go down, I'm assuming. So there has to be something else on top of it.
You have good instinct, sir.
Interesting.
They would be, in my imagination, I would say that they have established, they've had time. They've had roughly 40 years or so, if my math is correct, to be able to figure out how they're going to, find some significance in these Americas, and how they get into all of this. If they get into all of this, that's the stuff of,
Interesting. You're building a foundation big time. I dig that. Right on.
I'm trying to.
But how does the time? Because right now in Elysium Gardens, we're in what, 68?
19. No, because Malcolm X died in 65, I believe. So 62, I believe it is.
Okay.
Somewhere around there. Yeah, somewhere around there. It's the 60s, early 60s. Let's say that. But
I like that you held back bringing Seesaw back, Tevin, to a couple of issues, because by the time he came back, I was like, I needed to see this dude again. Like, I really, and he's become like Hood Constantine.
Yes, and which is purposeful.
Okay.
It's typically, like, as much as I love Constantine, there's a version of that guy that's British. I believe that, Alan Moore wanted him to be Sting at one time.
Yes.
Who I love Sting. A big picture of me and Sting downstairs. But I figured, what's the Philadelphia version of that guy? What does he sound like? What's the guy who can mix with various entities, spiritual entities, and still have his own unique flavor and still feel like he's still the guy from Philly? So
dude refuses to code switch, refuses, and I love it.
No, there's no why. You're dead.
Not even a chance.
Oh,
yeah.
I
love
it. I just love when he goes to John Adams' Purgatory, and he's like, so your purgatory is you just getting clapped for, and he's just like, you killed me? He's like, yeah, and you needed it.
Yeah, you need to kill him. He's going to play a big part in Arc 3. He's probably my favorite character to write because you rarely see that character. The character who sounds like that, who looks like that, but has some semblance of spiritual depth. It's not just reactive. A lot of characters, I think, in that world of badassery that we all sort of find in comics, they really aren't connected to their emotions. They really are more their anger and rage and that stuff, but not so much the sensitive parts of themselves and the spiritual part of themselves. That's a big
first issue. He's already over it from the get-go.
Yeah, I wanted him. I introduced him basically. He was in the first issue a little bit, but in the second one with his grandmother, I wanted to establish that these vampires feel and that they feel pain.
The scene with his grandmother in issue 12, where just that she's in heaven, the dog's there with her. Oh, I loved it.
and I wanted him to be able to, to represent that idea of hope. He's a hopeful figure. That within all of us, that Zarathustra principle of man to Superman, that within all of us is the possibility of being better, but we have to do certain things and sort of have our own code, our own moral code, and he certainly has that.
Yes.
I had put on Instagram the page, like every issue, there's always something that hits me. And like this last issue, it was in particular John walking through Purgatory and then going over mistakes he made. Mm-hmm. Where he was like, I never owned a slave, but I accepted that others did and didn't do anything about it. And then talking about subjugation of women, he's like, it was just the reality of the times. He's like, I could have done better. Yes. Purgatory had a purpose.
The thing about two people being flawed, about everybody being flawed, that's right out of the mouth of my therapist. She actually said that to me in regards to, we were just talking about perfectionism, and how there are people, unfortunately I have a little bit of this, to where everything has to be a particular way. And you judge yourself so harshly sometimes because you're less than perfect. And no one's perfect. We're all flawed, and to be able to find the self-awareness, to be able to see your flaws versus sort of doubling down on them and defining yourself by them, those at times can be the most problematic people. And having been a person like that for the better part of my life, just sort of identifying with the stuff about myself that I don't like, and then at a certain point, you see how hurtful that can be to other people. And then once you sort of become aware that that's what you're doing, now the responsibility comes into behaving better or doubling down on that idea. And so for John Adams, just bringing him back for the sake of bringing him back because he's a character in the series probably would just be a lazy thing, but to have him come back with a more evolved sense of himself sort of fits. Like, now how would Abigail look at this guy that she's known for so long, but he's a different version of that guy, and how does that play into their relationship? That's interesting to me. But just bringing him back just to bring him back was kind of like and Purgatory is sort of a place I've never seen this in religious doctrine, but for me, a place of contemplation, because you're not in heaven or hell. You're kind of in a place of gray, and that if used properly, maybe there's a possibility you could heal there.
Thanks for sharing that insight about yourself. I really appreciate that, by the way. Like, you really open up a lot about yourself, and I'm grateful for that.
Well, thank you.
Gaskins had a bad time.
The book is sort of that. I mean, the book is sort of me taking a hard look at me and other people that I've known in my life. And, I think all of us, to lesser or greater degrees, are trying to figure out life. And I think we those of us that gravitate to stories, like in comics, some are looking for just base entertainment, like me sometimes. The simple Batman story is that'll satisfy me. But there are times when you want to delve into something that's a little bit more evolved, and I haven't seen a lot of that come out of my culture, to where these questions were asked. Usually the questions that are asked are purely race-based questions, or good versus evil questions, or maybe fear-based questions, but not much in regards to psychological, spiritual aspects. Don't get a lot of that. So I was happy to be able to deal with it. I wrote I'm doing one of the stories for Marvel for Cloak and Dagger for the King in Black series.
No way.
And I'm doing a little bit of that in between Cloak and Dagger. And so anytime I can use, I think my better writing has always come when I'm taking a hard look at myself and sort of, or the human condition, and I'm speaking to things that matter to me from the heart, not just from my head.
Right
Cloak
on.
and Dagger are some of my favorite characters that I feel get underused or not used correctly.
Yeah, and I think what Marvel wants to do with them, at least what they share with me, is pretty exciting stuff. I think, again, I can't talk about that direction, but I believe it's a direction to where you really can evolve them. I'm always excited, sort of like what Alan Moore did with Swamp Thing. What Lin Wen and Bernie Wrightson did was fantastic, for its day. And then when Alan Moore came along and added this different thing about, that he wasn't Alec Holland. He never was Alec Holland, and he had to learn to be this other spiritual creature that, evolving the character in a particular way was always like amazing to me. And Miracle Man in the same way of taking the trope of Shazam or, Captain Marvel and turning it on its head and saying that probably if a guy had that kind of power, he wouldn't just be for truth, justice, and I guess the British way. He would become a god because that's what power does. It either corrupts you to a certain place where you no longer relate to those who don't have power. So being able to take characters like Cloak and Dagger and evolving them somewhat into trying to reach a certain potential that I think is different than what's been done in the past is certainly exciting.
I still laugh. There's a DC documentary where Len Wein's talking about calling Alan Moore up to do Swamp Thing, and Alan Moore hung up on him thinking it was his friends fucking with him.
Wow.
And he called back. He's like, "No, I'm seriously calling you from DC."
I believe that Alan Moore would do that.
Rodney, so right now one of my favorite writers, Rom V, is writing Swamp Thing.
Yes,
and I feel like he
ask
is
if you're reading
a fantastic
you got it right on.
Yeah. Honestly, like knowing like how big of a Swamp Thing fan that you are, I feel like if Rom V ever like passes the mic, like I would love to see you write Swamp Thing. Can we campaign? Like, who do we as a collective group have to talk to make sure that, like, can I get like even like a one shot? Like,
at
how do we
DC
get you
Comics,
Swamp Thing?
And I actually have
just keep posting it, right?
I actually have a story that I would really like to tell. I think I pitched it to them a month and a half ago. We'll see what they say, but I would love to do a little run on Swamp Thing. I mean,
you like the story so far?
all of this is sort of connecting to childhood loves, and there's not a whole lot of innocence in my life, but comics still sort of speak to that sense of innocence and purity and goodness. I mean, and certainly in the world that we're in today, which could be depressing if you look at it from face value.
Right.
The great escape of comics. I mean, it's funny, people ask me why I do so many podcasts and all of this. It's like, you guys, both you guys and the larger audience, it almost feels like kindred spirits. Like we all love the same thing. And there's something beautiful in that. There's something connective. Like when I was a kid, and there might be 2 or 3 kids in the neighborhood that read comics, I was friends with them. And we would trade comics, we would fight comics, we would talk comics, we would do all of that stuff. It was only 2 or 3, but we would find each other. And now, because of technology and Twitter and all of this stuff, we can find each other as adults and continue that. Yes, that's why I'm a fan of your background. It's like we can continue this conversation, and most of my conversations when it comes to writing, TV and film, are purely they become commerce conversations. It's very little about it that speaks to idealism. And if you're part of this community as a creator, you're not doing it for money, because you don't make that much money, comparatively speaking. And so it has to come from the heart. And for me, the beautiful part of it is being able to still write from being able to write from my heart, being excited about characters and stories and Swamp Thing and Batman and all this other stuff, along with my creative characters. It keeps you, it gives you something to look forward to.
You just got a long-term fan after you just said that, man. Like I'm on the Rodney Barnes train now. Like you did it. Like saying what you just said. I'm on the train now, man.
I want Andrew. I need Andrew back. I feel like I did Andrew wrong the last time. It was just Wi-Fi connection, and I was offended for absolutely nothing, Andrew. Please forgive me, Andrew. I'm sorry. I'm saying it publicly, Andrew.
I will make sure he watches this.
Yeah, we went an extra 25 minutes, I think, just for me and Andrew, for me to do my Andrew thing. But yeah, man. I mean, it's just being part of a larger community, and even some of the creators I've been able to become friends with just through Twitter and comments. It feels like good. It feels like you're in a place of in a safe place that no matter how bad the world gets, I watch a lot of news because I'm a glutton for punishment. And if you look at the news, all you're going to hear is the death rate because of COVID and what's happening in politics and how polarized we are as a society. But I think there's something about the sweet spot of being able to come together and talk about characters and stories and the connective tissue of this thing that we all kind of dig. That's good.
I like to think that Jen and I got some people turned on to your book because we've nonstop talked about it. I've given it out as gifts to people who are like, I like horror books, but I hate vampires. Like, no, read this. This is different from the vampire genre. It's something completely different.
So kind of speaking of...
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of which, so I was able to pick up 2 extra copies of Killadelphia, and I wanted to go ahead and give them away to like people who are watching the show right now. So not in the live chat, but I'd love to go ahead and like either in the live chat, maybe on the like comments on the video on the actual YouTube, or even on Twitter. I'm going to give these one each to like, one person. To anyone that I want you to do hashtag Rodney Barnes for Swamp Thing. So either do hashtag Rodney Barnes for Swamp Thing, like in the YouTube channel, either like Instagram or on Twitter. I'm not really on Twitter, so someone else will have to like find it for me, but hashtag Rodney Barnes for Swamp Thing, and you could possibly win a Killadelphia #1.
Was that your
I will add to that and give you a Killadelphia #2 that I'll sign.
Whoa.
Oh, hell yeah.
Whoa.
There you go. So hashtag Rodney Barnes for Swamp Thing.
Right on. I wanna hop in on that.
Yeah. So
the whole Twitter rack
up.
of them, like right behind me. So there you go.
Phil Noir said that she'd watch Twitter for you.
Thank you. She actually messaged me. It was so sweet. She messaged me on Twitter, and I didn't even see her message for like a week. And I'm like, I never come on Twitter, so like find me on Instagram. I'm on Instagram more. Like I'm on TikTok all the time now. But
Twitter's like going down a dark alley.
It is.
Yeah, it can
like
be.
You can make it through, and it'd be perfectly fine. It's just a dark alley, or you could get stabbed. So it's like it's one or the other.
Sounds like Killadelphia. Gotcha.
Yeah, well, you can get bitten. That's what's different. That's different.
So Rodney, I saw that they announced that Lando show for Disney Plus, and I was like, in my head, I was like, let Rodney write it, because if you get Billy D. Williams telling stories about young Lando and have it be Donald Glover, that would be the perfect mix. And I imagine you can tell some good you can tell some good stories, or have like different creators tell a different story if they're going to do it like that. I would love to see you do at least one episode.
I would love to. I mean, I will say this again, and not to pander, but I love what they've done. I love Mandalorian and what they've done with like Wanda and Vision, and my good friend Michael Waldron, and what he's going to do with Loki. And I just think that it's some really exciting stuff for. Sometimes when you get these streaming places and they're doing programming, it feels almost like we got to get stuff out there. We're just, it's not as much layering to the content, but they've done a fantastic job, the Star Wars folks and the Disney Marvel folks.
I mean, I love the fact, growing up, I never thought I would see Falcon or Black Panther on the big screen. I mean, and kids know them and love them. It's unreal.
The Hulk I grew up with, Lou Ferrigno, who I loved. I met him at a comic book convention. He was the best of that. They had a Captain America that just had a helmet on that looked like a helmet, like a bike helmet.
From the 90s, yeah.
Spider-Man just kind of had some weapon that he threw at
Yeah.
you. It was horrible. It was horrible. So the things that we have just now with Thanos and Endgame and all of this stuff that, you know, is beautiful is it's amazing to me. So I agree.
Seeing little kids dress up as Black Panther for Halloween, just it's insane to think. And
All
like,
all of that. My grandmother did that. I was like, you never read. You threw my comic books away. How dare you cross yourself?
I mean,
I have
go ahead.
Oh, I have a couple of like my partner's nephews. They're mixed race, and they like seeing them be able to see Spider-Man on the big screen, like Miles Morales. Like, I think that's so important. So I don't know. It's really cool to be able to have them see someone.
For all of the folks that hate that idea, like how you know, women and people of color sort of jumped in and, you know, become a part of this universe, that when I grew up, I never really paid too much attention to it. You know, when Black Lightning or Luke Cage or whatever came on, certainly I would buy those books because it was a rare thing. But, you know, now this way that Kim said it, as far as representation is concerned, have it being a natural part of my upbringing. I can't imagine what that would be like. To be able to see, like in Teen Titans, I think they're going to have Tim Drake is going to be a black kid, and that's going to be their Tim Drake. You know, that's going to be even Nick Fury. I didn't grow up with that Nick Fury. I had a different Nick Fury. You know, and just to have it be a natural part of characters walking around talking, and that you don't even have to think about race; it's just there. You know, that's pretty phenomenal.
I completely agree with you 100%. Like it's nice to see. It's a good feeling. Seeing my kids growing up with Wakanda, like seeing that story. Like it's natural. It's not out of place. It's not forced. It's not.
You don't judge it. You don't go, wow, man, this is incredible. When you're a kid, I say, wow, you know, because I remember what it was. You know, the reference point. Everybody was white, and if you did have a woman, you know, she looked like a guy's version of what a woman should be. She didn't look like a real woman.
And she looked like the entire time.
Yeah, and she would walk around and she'd be the sexiest version. She would wear the most uncomfortable stuff, you know, for crime fighting that you would ever wear. And you didn't really give it a second thought when you're 8 years old or whatever. You thought this is just how it is. And now to have a world where that has evolved to a place where there's a different standard for what a thoughtful standard for what is really speaks more to that you have women writing these characters, and you know,
thank goodness.
Yeah, it's like it's not just the characters themselves being different, but you do have people behind the scenes that have some input, and it's not perfect. I don't think anything ever will be perfect, but when I look at where I started with comics to where they are today, it's, you know, it's miles ahead of what I ever thought it would be.
It's so much more fun for me. I get so much enjoyment out of it now.
Well, to me, it's I feel more emotionally connected to it without having to think about that other thing. You know, it's like if I don't go on Twitter and see the hate that goes with it, and I just look at it for face value, I can lose myself in just the characters and their stories. I don't have to think about, man, there's no black people? Really? You know, I don't have to do that. You know, come on, man. How can you be in Brooklyn and there's no black people? You know,
are you kidding me?
Yeah, not even walking on the street. You know, it's like, come on. So, we've gotten better.
I think that a big part of that narrative too is that there's especially on Twitter, there's a lot of dummies on Twitter who see this diversity and this dark alley of Twitter, and they see diversity, you know, in characters, and they see diversity with creators, and they're like, that's forced diversity. And, you know, comics are getting too political, and it's like, my dudes, you know, someone's existence is not political. Like, the fact that there are living, breathing people of color, that there are living, breathing women. That is not political. That is just life. And our comics should look kind of how life does, even though it's superhero and fantastical. Like, comics should at least like tell us life stories. And that's what I love about your work. Like, you're talking about bringing these personal experiences in, and I think that stories like this just it makes it so real.
Well, I think if you have if instead of writing from instead of writing from a place to where, if you're writing from a thoughtful place and you just have these characters, as Dee was saying, to where they're diverse and they're honest and they're being portrayed in a particular way, some people are threatened by that idea because they liked it better the other way, and they liked it to where I think they were on top, so to speak. Everything looked like them, and if you had it was an anomaly to have anything that was different. They even would say it was different. They put it in the name. It wasn't just a panther. It was a Black Panther, or it was Black Lightning, or Black Goliath, or Black somebody. We had to warn you first that it was something black coming, and then just in case that there was a thing. And I think now, just to be able to have a Miles Morales and to be able to tell a story like Spider-Verse, or to just have a character that's not necessarily talking about race, because I don't think the sum total of my life isn't just the color of my skin or the persecution my culture has suffered or endured. It certainly, I think, speaks to the opportunity to tell human stories, because at the end of the day, that's the connective tissue. And back to Killadelphia, I don't talk a lot about race, overtly. I don't have like the Klan or this or any of that kind of stuff. I try to give all of the characters, regardless of where they come from, like, again, some human dilemma, some shortcoming psychologically, some flaw that they're dealing with as people. And everybody's an equal playing field. Again, that's why I introduced John Adams in the 3rd issue. Oh, he was in the 2nd issue, but I didn't talk about him a lot, because it would have become the John Adams book if he was there from the beginning. And I wanted the father-son story, the human story between the two of them, was sort of the star, and I thought set the tone for what the series would be. And, when you talk about the stuff that you see in the superhero world, the Falcon that we see with Captain America now is sort of just fighting next to Cap and Bucky, and who's going to have the shield, and you don't really have to get into the politics of it all the time. You can lose yourself in the same way Batman loses himself when he's fighting Joker. I'm not thinking, hey, this is rich white guy. I'm just thinking about the adventure at hand, and I think that's necessary, as much as it's necessary at times to talk about politics and race. Sometimes I want to just lose myself in a story about something else.
Kind of like Tevin in this story, it's not about the city. It's like, I hustled for money, then I hustled for blood. Mm-hmm. Now, before I go, I want to do something better.
Mm-hmm. I want to be a better individual and self-actualize.
And just, that whole moment with his grandmother is just, it's beautiful. Like, every moment he's had with his grandmother as she was passing, she's like, no, I'm ready to die. Like,
Well, that came from real life. That was my relationship with my grandmother. She's the reason I'm not a serial killer to this day. Sometimes I wonder, would it be more fun to be a serial killer than a writer? But that scene in the hospital was actually, I had that scene. My grandmother had a stroke. It was the theme of it was the same. And shortly before she passed, we had that conversation. And so, again, being able to find real moments in my life that I think moved me, hopefully those moments will move the reader when applied to those characters, relative to the story that they're telling. So, yeah.
I gotta ask. This is probably my last question for you too. I want to talk about a relationship between Staxter and Junior and the crime museum, but I don't want to push that right now. I want to talk about Corson, like what?
Snapping dicks.
Where did that character come from, man?
Everybody uses Lucifer. Everybody uses the devil as the big demon bad in hell. And if when you look at theology, there are lots of demons, and they have different levels of power and influence over evil. And so Corson was a big one. And so I decided to give him his own little neighborhood in hell. And, he has his torments, and he does the thing that he does. He's the Nino Brown of his little part of hell. So,
and he likes heaven. That's what I really like. He likes heaven. That's where I really love the interaction.
Well, because that's usually how bullies are. Like, bullies only respect you when you stand up to them. Right. When they know, they sort of have a disdain for you when you accept their bullying.
And Tevin, just like, you're gonna sit here and snap dicks all day.
It's a good point. It's a good point. Is this the sum total of your day is doing this thing? I'm here for a bigger purpose, and I think you'll see more of Corson. You'll get to know Corson. I dig Corson, and
fun to write.
And Corson will be in the because the Killadelphia world is going to expand into other books. Corson is going to play a role in that as well. So there you go.
See, now you just open up a door to a whole new slew of questions, man. You realize that?
Well, if I decided to reach back and show you
become a Sandman universe,
show you a picture of Corson in another book that's part of the Killadelphia world. Yeah, I can't.
You're doing it. You're doing it.
I wish I could just show you everything. I wish I could invite you guys over and we could all. I could show you all of this stuff. I can show you this whiteboard with all of the answers.
I wouldn't be able to look at your daughter without picturing her with her cat in her mouth.
Well, the bigger thing is she had the girl in her mouth. She had a whole human being in her mouth. Jason and I had a conversation too. He's like, "You think she can handle a whole person in her mouth?" Yes.
Go for it. Bravo to him and his Easter egg. That Mulder and Scully Easter egg was amazing.
Yes. I love it. That was another thing too. I mean, when I think about all of the films and stuff that influenced me, season 3 of the X-Files certainly stands out. I love season 3 more than I love anything. Kolchak from your Al Sucker comment.
He was a cool man. He had some tough questions.
Yes. I think of the Hammer films with, Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. The Universal monsters. There's so many influences. Candyman.
You can definitely
all
feel
of that. And I love, I'm fortunate enough to be friends with Tony Todd, and it's so many different influences that
I would love to see him play Toppy.
Yeah,
that's what I was gonna say earlier. You would too. You would like to see this? Is this like a thing that you would like to see that you can't tell us about? Yeah. Hashtag Tony Todd.
Hashtag Tony Todd for Toppy. I think there's so many different influences for horror in me that an homage from time to time to anytime it feels right. Vincent Price has been in one of the issues, but you'll have to find them. You actually mentioned the issue, but I don't think it was as clear because I'm a huge Dr. Fives fan as well.
Now I got to reread it.
So any of the times
show's over, guys.
Yeah. Any of the times that I can stick in some folks from that, I'm always looking for that sweet spot.
I still love that Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee laughed in John Carpenter's face when he asked them to be Dr. Loomis.
Yes, yeah, but I forget what was his name that played Dr. Loomis.
Donald Pleasance.
Yes, Donald Pleasance.
He was amazing. But I'm trying to imagine Christopher Lee or Peter Cushing playing that role, because Peter Cushing had just been in Star Wars right before that. He was like, I will not be in this.
Nah, he didn't have the thing with Donald Pleasance was he was so passionate. He was like a couple amps up from everybody else who didn't get how powerful Michael Myers was and how evil he was in every scene. He was very, very passionate, very committed to his work.
You guys definitely showing your souls with your horror love. I'm more of a Jeffrey Combs Reanimator kind of guy. So
I love Reanimator.
I dig Reanimator, but see, the thing is, I saw a lot of these movies in the theater. I was, again, as an only child, I spent a lot of time in the movie theaters, and I'm so old that there used to be like Disney movies in the morning, and then they would have a double feature at night. So there'd be like a Chuck Norris movie and a John Carpenter movie, and they would be all of this stuff. And I didn't know if they were coming. I would just stay in the movies all day long. So it'd be like Apple Dumpling Gang,
wow,
and That Darn Cat.
wow,
and then Blackula and Blackula Scream. And I would stay through. If I had like $5, oh my God, I could stay there for 20 hours. When I was a kid, there were people that didn't want to go to the movies with me because I never wanted to leave. I remember the King Kong, the one with Jeff Bridges, 5 times.
Oh, Jessica Lange.
There you go. 5 times. I just stayed because he was between the World Trade Center and he threw a train. And this was like incredible. As a child, this was incredible. Now when I look at it, it's like you could tell it's a dude in a suit. And you could tell they just built a hand and they kept moving the giant hand around the train. It wasn't a real, you look at the Peter Jackson one, it's like there's really a Kong someplace. They went to wherever Kong was. But
underrated film. I thought Peter Jackson film Kong was great.
That Kong Godzilla, I don't know what to think of it. I saw the trailer. The jury's out.
My creative partner in crime, Max Bornstein, was the writer of it. So I'm going to bless it and say it's going to be fantastic, and that it surely is up for an Oscar.
Absolutely.
Certainly, it'll be
I'm just biding my time for Dune.
Yeah, it'll be one of the greatest monster movies in the history of.
See what you're doing, Rodney. I see what you're doing.
They're always entertaining.
When people say that Kong has no chance, I'm like, Godzilla's got little arms. It's not like Kong can move in a way. Godzilla's got little arms, so he can't like throw a punch. He's always gonna be short.
He does have little T-Rex arms.
Fire breath. He's got the fire breath. That's true, but he can only shoot it this way. If you can dodge, you can get past the fire. I'm going for Kong. So I'm a Kong guy.
I do have a question. Did you always have planned for the end of this arc to be the one thing a married couple never wants to hear from the other? We need to talk.
Well, as a person who has suffered the pain of divorce, I can tell you that is absolutely true, and that'll play into arc number 3 as well. As far as what marital problems, you don't expect. Once your husband's gone, you don't expect him to come back. Once he died and you saw him melt and become nothing, you're thinking, all right, I'm free. I got the Sally Hemmings thing. I can be happy now. And boom, he's back. And it's like, that's not right.
Jason drew John to look like Jason Statham.
Yes.
With a beard.
Well, the thing is, when he's in Purgatory, because we had that conversation, I think Jason wanted Seesaw to say something about his appearance, and I couldn't figure out a way to do it without disrupting the flow. But there is there's the guy from that period of time who's stuck in Purgatory because he identifies himself with that. That's when he was president. He looked like that. And then there's the guy who's back now to do whatever he's going to do. Juxtaposing those two ideas has a lot to do with the evolution of John from that period of time to this period of time.
Jupiter mentally breaking and saying he's free. Mm-hmm. Like, does he have a part to play going forward, or is he kind of out of the story now?
No, I'm a big Jupiter fan. I think power is relative when you create Jupiter-like characters. It's like for a minute, Jupiter seemed like he was the most powerful vampire in the history of vampires, and he was truly the badass, whatever. But under that, there was something else that, for him,
Broken individual.
The broken individual that was broken by a very painful set of circumstances for centuries. I can only say Jupiter will be around because certain other characters from history are around, and who knows how they're all going to interact with one another.
Watching Jupiter get whipped while Thomas is just on the swing, laughing and smiling.
Yeah. And, even thinking about, not saying this is going to be part of the storyline, but thinking about how to go from that image of Jefferson not really being able to empathize with Jupiter's plight and being whipped. In his mind, Jupiter's his best friend. Why'd you ever leave? What's the matter? What's wrong? And Jupiter has a whole different way. It's almost how I told the story too, how I presented the idea of Jupiter. You have Abigail telling Jupiter's story, but then you have Jupiter telling Jupiter's story. And
stories, yeah,
they're different in the way that they come about. And I think that all has to do with, I think insecurity has a way of creating its own sense of narcissism. You become so wrapped up in protecting the identity, your own identity, that it's hard to feel for someone else because you're so busy looking inward at yourself. And I think that's one of the things that certainly Jupiter is wrestling with. His pain has been so profound that when you focus on that pain solely, it's hard to, that was one of the ideas about him being free and breaking away from Abigail. But there's still work that needs to be done within him, because I don't know if we ever get to a place where we're completely free. I think you always are haunted by something.
Right on.
How long of a hiatus is it going to be for when the book comes back again? Because I saw the trade comes out in March.
Yeah, I think April. We don't want to take too long of a break.
You don't want to do a saga?
I don't want too long of a break.
No, I don't think we haven't. We're doing well. 12 sold out. We're going to a second printing. So that's fantastic. And again, I think that has a lot to do with folks like yourself who, independent comics are tough, and they don't get the same shine as the big two. And being able to have word of mouth outside of your little world and your little space is invaluable. So always thank you to you guys.
Thank you. Just giving us great content, just in general. And also, Diamond does a horrible job promoting books or talking about them in the sales blurbs. Mm-hmm. And I thought that Kat Salazar, Image's PR person, kind of promoting books that I thought were a little lesser and didn't give you guys the shine you deserved.
I appreciate it, but I'm in previews this week. I'm looking.
Mine means
spotlight of previews.
You're a bit of a nerd, aren't you, Rodney? I like it.
If you could see this office, you would say to yourself, it's something. How old is this man? It's like, does he have any other life? It's in here. I posted it on Instagram, as I do most things that have to do with comics, but the indie spotlight, where I'm talking about it. So there I am. There I go. So I've made it. I've made it, Mom. I'm in preview. Thank you, preview. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I love it. I love it.
But no, it's necessary to have other outlets to be able to talk about your books and to talk about the stories, because a lot of people say, Killadelphia, what's that? What is this? I see conversations sometimes when other people are talking about it and they say, I've never heard of it, I've never seen it, I've never this. So it's necessary to be able to connect with a larger audience from a grassroots place, more so than depending on mass advertising, because you're not going to get it. So
999 trade helped.
Yes,
that first trade.
And hopefully the second one will build off of that, and we got big stuff planned for Arc 3 that I think will continue to evolve the story. I mean, I look at the first trade, the first story arc. I was really just laying the foundation of who these people were, what the stakes were, what the emotional stakes were, and trying to just create a foundation that we could build from. You get into, I think if I had thrown more people, like in the second arc, it would have been confusing because there's still some people that say, "Oh, there's so many characters." I like a lot of characters.
The backstories were important, I think, to really focus on, especially for Toppy, where he comes from and what was going on with him, because he was a fascinating character. I mean, the fact that he fought for the South, just interesting stuff.
And again, being able to look at different periods of history. Some of the vampires don't come from that period. Some come from the 40s and the 50s and, modern day. And, even Seesaw comes from, a more modern time. And being able to tell those stories really gives me an opportunity to speak to history that's a little more current and a lot of the associative problems and issues that came with that period. So, that's part of the part that's exciting for me is just being able to speak to history. I dig history, and being able to do it. It's funny. Black History Month is coming in a couple of days, and I've always wondered, when I was a kid, I wondered why it was a Black History Month. Why can't we just have history? Why isn't everything just sort of, it happened? It's like it didn't happen over here in February, and then we get to go back to everything being the way that it was. So sort of for me, again, in a cathartic way, being able to integrate history and to be able to speak to not just having, like when you see these movies sometimes, they're told from, 12 Years a Slave. It's told from Solomon Northup's perspective, and the white people are in the background. And being able to tell the story with all of it sort of mixed in together doesn't bastardize it. In a way, it's able to have all of the historical context from both perspectives together rather than divided. Thank you, kid.
I'd be remiss without asking you about this, but I saw that you are doing a interpretation of Michael Bennett, the NFL player's book, Things That Make White People Uncomfortable.
Yes. It's an anthology series, which will have some genre elements as well. But its intended goal is stated in the title, is to make certain folks that are devoid of melanin slightly uncomfortable. And by uncomfortable, it's more of, again, when you talk about Killadelphia, and when I talk about history and telling history in my unique way, I think I grew up with Norman Lear sitcoms, and they had a very specific math. And that math was conservative whites were bad, liberal whites were good, and blacks were kind of martyrs that were hanging in the balance, looking for someone to come along to, either save them, help them, or to show that there's hope someplace in the world. And I think that math was fine, certainly for its time. But being able to look at extreme liberal thought, and sometimes how like victimization can stifle a culture as well in a different way than conservative thought does. Season 1 is about that, being able to look at some of the problematic issues from a different lens, from a different entry point. I wish I could tell you about the episodes themselves, but I'd probably get sued. I'm sure I signed a piece of paper somewhere along the way saying that I can't. But Michael's book deals with a lot of pop culture and a lot of the questions that he asked himself. Some of the stuff that we've talked about tonight, like, why are there only a few black superheroes? Why did they just fight in black neighborhoods? Why did they just do this? Why didn't Thanos come to like Compton? Why is he only coming to
That's a
this
story we
place?
need.
Yeah, it's like, why do apocalyptic things with apocalyptic implications only take place in certain areas and not so much in other areas? It's almost like you create a second-class citizen. You almost make black people a subculture, because they're off to the side and they do black things and they do them over there. And we'll shine a light on that from time to time. But we're going to come back here for where the big stuff happens. And that happens in the major areas. And being able to speak to stuff like that and those types of themes to speak the unspoken, I think is the goal of the show. And that will probably make some folks uncomfortable, but not in a way to polarize anyone. It's like, I try to not have, certainly at this stage in my life, polarized thinking, because I don't think there are any ideals. I think that there's some virtues in conservative thought, and I think there's some virtues in liberal thought. I think it's when you get to the far extremes where things become more problematic. And because that makes for good television, I think we speak to those sides more so than anything else. So being able to do a series that speaks directly to that is it's a challenge, but a good one.
I think that it's really important for things like that, and I think even for me, someone who considers myself an ally, and even over this past year, looking at the Black Lives Matter movement, like I know that even I've had to kind of take a look in the mirror and be like, who am I as an ally? Like, if I'm just reading all these cool books and shit like that, like what am I actually doing? So I think, like, even for people who consider themselves having already been made uncomfortable, like we still need to get comfortable in our uncomfortableness. So I think I'm excited for that. I think that's good.
Even that idea that you're able to say that, it's funny, I pitch a lot to networks and studios, and they have an idea of what it means to be black. There's so many different ways to be black because there's so many different ways of being a human being. There is no one monolithic idea. You could talk to two other black people that are my age that came up in completely different circumstances. It's like on the Lakers show, you have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, and Spencer Haywood as characters. And, my argument from the beginning was that's three different ways to be black. Magic grew up in Lansing, Michigan. Kareem grew up in Harlem, and Spencer Haywood grew up in the Deep South. They're all going to approach, because when you're part of a team, the beauty of a team is you got all of these characters from different places mixing in, trying to figure out how we can be one thing. But they're approaching that from, the cultural idea of where they came from, what's right and wrong, from their perspective, and being able to sort of explore that type of stuff. You don't get to see it a lot. On sports shows, usually it's about the coach, the coach's life and whatever. And when it comes to the team, you got the black guy that's funny, and the black guy that's bad and problematic, and the black guy that just wants to do good things. He usually gets shot. And, it's like they're one-dimensional characters. And so to be able to, to explore with some degree of intricacy, the differences, I think, is the big thing. There's no one way to be anything. But I think television, the way we've told stories for a long time, really there's a black way and there's a white way, or there's, you're either the bad guy or you're the funny guy or whatever. And I think we're in an age now where being able to speak with nuance and specificity is a blessing more so than anything else.
We had Steve Orlando on the show, who wrote Midnighter, and he's writing Commanders in Crisis, and he talked about like queer representation growing up, how, he didn't know how someone queer was supposed to act as a male because what they were showing on TV, there wasn't really the butch or, it was always the effeminate male.
And it was always about their sexuality as well. It's like their sexuality was the first thing.
Yeah.
Because that was the thing that, that was what made them interesting to whoever was telling the story. So.
Yeah, and we talked about that, and then diversity, and how there's this weird thought of there's forced diversity, and he basically called bullshit on that. The diversity is what he wants to put in. There's no forcing it. It was an interesting conversation, but the queer representation growing up when he did was fascinating to hear, because it's something I never thought about. You watch the movies, like I'm sure, like many Eddie Murphy specials, he was doing his joke about queer males.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was the character that I knew growing up, because that was all I saw. It was that, that idea was the one that was first presented, and it really wasn't until I got into college that you met real people, and that sort of dispelled the myth that I had from back home. And I think that's ultimately what I'm trying to do, and a lot of folks are trying to do, is to tell stories from different entry points that feel a lot more honest than the stories that I grew up with. And I'm sure when I'm gone, and other people are telling these types of stories, hopefully they will evolve to even a more honest depiction than my depiction or other folks' depiction. I think, there's a movement going that I don't think is going to stop, and it's a good one, but I think it threatens a lot of folks. And being able to, but I don't think it's going anyplace.
I won't
whether
let it.
it's
That's
comics
sure.
or wherever. I think it's here to stay.
I also think it's some of these people don't have those people in their lives where you have to learn. Like,
I certainly did. We grew up with a whole bunch. I didn't know what misogyny meant. I didn't know what any of patriarchy. I didn't know what any of these things meant growing up. It was just, this is the way that things are done. And then as you get out into the world and you're challenged by different ideas, again, you can go back to that thing with John Adams of, okay, I've been presented with different information. And what do I do with this information? Either I accept it for what it is, or do I double down because I've identified myself with what I've been taught and the people who taught me those things. So which camp am I going to be into? And some people go kicking and screaming into the future, and some people hold on, I think, and identify with the past. And I'm empathetic to both, because it's hard for some people to accept a different world than the one that they knew. And I think it's necessary, though, because I think Jennifer said something earlier about when we were talking about women. It's necessary if the world is going to become a better place, that we see things in a more honest way, and we're more honest with ourselves about our shortcomings. Again, it's not easy, but I certainly think it's necessary if we're going to get to a better place.
Because otherwise, we're just standing in the same spot. Agreed.
I don't want to get political, but like, it's weird that how
political.
After we have a black president, all of a sudden we get the dog whistle to every racist in the nation come out, and I thought we were better than we really were, and it was disheartening to see what happened. And maybe I'm just naive.
I don't know any black people that were surprised that they stormed the Capitol that day. I don't know. I knew before when he said, for them to walk to the Capitol, I knew exactly what was going to happen when they got there. They weren't going to get there and just yell, I'm at the Capitol now. I'm at the place that he told me to come to. I got to take my government back. What do you think is going to happen?
And then you get that Yahoo from Colorado tweeting where freaking Pelosi was. It's insane.
No, but when you believe that you're losing something, even that you thank you, Kim. Kim won't surprise you. It's like I think the fear of change, the fear of change is terrifying to some folks. And they look to TV, and TV doesn't look like TV used to look to. And like you were saying about having a president that's black, and with all these black people visiting, the White House, and that's not what we see the White House as being, and we just don't like the way this world doesn't feel like America anymore, because I identify with America being like me. I don't look at it being these others. I don't see them as being America. And so, and I think that that's we've always had sort of from the Civil War, North and the South type of sensibility. And I don't think that part is going anywhere. I think there will always be those who, say liberals are the worst thing ever, and those of us who say, conservatives there's some problematic thinking on the right. So that the right and the left, have a thing. I think that'll always sort of be here. I hope it doesn't get worse than what it's been. But I wonder how we're able to get back to a place where there's some degree of unity. But then again, sometimes I feel like TV does a great job at stoking those flames.
A whole channel dedicated to it.
Yeah, but it's like, to stoking those flames and keeping us sort of at odds. We live in a capitalist society, so all perspectives sort of are marketed to. And in that marketing, I think, I don't think people are looking to it as being problematic because they're gaining, they're winning, they're getting something from doing it. And they're not looking at the end goal that people are dying and people are hurting. And
that goes back what you said before about people with power, like absolute power across absolutely Evan Burr. So
yeah.
To plug Angela Davis, because seriously, like I freaking love Angela Davis. And if anyone has interested in these themes, I highly recommend her book, Freedom is a Constant Struggle, because I feel like it changed my perspective on what it means to be an activist and all of these things that, we're kind of talking about, like issues with race, issues with capitalism, issues with the prison industrial complex. They're all linked. And you have to kind of get at the foundation of them all. And what we're really seeing is that capitalism is kind of the root of all that. I will not get too political. Maybe if someone wants to DM me or have a conversation, I'll talk for hours about politics, for real. But seriously, Angela Davis, Freedom is a Constant Struggle is a phenomenal book of short essays. It's an incredible read. And D, I actually have a copy for you that I'm going to send you. So it's on its way to you.
I've been checking my mailbox every day, just waiting.
Okay.
Even when Jupiter went to prison and he was speaking, that was my little nod to mass incarceration and the idea of freedom. I remember when I was kind of lost and I was looking for a job, I went to become a correctional officer, and I had never seen so many black people. I only made it 2 hours, and this is worse than when I was a Boy Scout. It was horrible. I've been horrible at a lot of different things, and
I, for one, am glad you were horrible at them.
Thank you. It's
you're
true.
here.
When I was a security guard, you could have stolen everything. So I worked at a hotel, and I would check in. I worked the 11 to 7 shift. I was awake from maybe 4 to 7, but I don't think I was conscious in between. I was a horrible security guard.
Not a job for you, no.
Oh man, it's I worked at Walmart. I worked at Target. I was a professional wrestler for a short period of time. That's another story for another day. I have done so many different things in this search to survive over the course of my life. But again, when I was a correctional officer and I saw the conditions up close and how many black people that there were, black men that they were crammed in these little cells
for dumb shit like weed.
I never forgot it, and that was what Jupiter was speaking to when he went to jail.
It's funny. I live in Florida, and I live in a weird part that's both progressive and backwards. Mm-hmm. 5 miles from me, the space shuttle goes off. SpaceX is here. And at the same time, there's some backwards ass people who will come into where I work and talk about how AOC is basically Hitler.
She makes people mad. She does. She brings the passion out of folks for sure.
I love it. I drink those tears.
There are folks on my timeline when they get really mad. It's a lot of exclamation points and a lot of capitalized. I'm like, I haven't seen it yet. What she's done to, to conjure this energy. And
There's a lot of old white folk near me.
Yeah, it's again. I think a lot of people don't want to see the world change. They like the world the way that it is. And if you think a lot of when you talk about like Angela Davis and certainly the Dr. Kings and a lot of those folks, they weren't like heroes during their period to the popular, to the masses. They were heroes to me, but they weren't necessarily celebrated during their periods of time.
I think about, I was reading Malcolm. I've read Malcolm X's biography, but I just read the comic book adaptation of his biography. And he talks about his meeting of Muhammad Ali. And, in the time, like, people did not like Muhammad Ali. Like, he converted to Islam. He was a draft dodger. So a lot of
because of his religion.
Because of his religion. So a lot of people hated Muhammad Ali. And I honestly think that's the same energy with Colin Kaepernick. So like I had that like correlation between the two. And
but yet they loved Elvis, who was pill popping and just
coke snorting. I mean,
and he stole some music from folks too. But
there's that.
My stepfather hated Muhammad Ali. And I didn't like my stepfather, so it was a perfect reason for me to love Ali. So I remember, like, towards the tail end of Ali's career, like it would be, we were the North and South. I'm rooting for Ali, and he's rooting for whoever, Frazier, whoever he was fighting at the time.
Ted Norton.
So yeah, but George Foreman, who was believed to, everybody thought was going to kill Ali at the time.
Who he called a giant ape.
Yeah, well, yes. He's a funny guy. But I just think that again, being able to speak to history and to be able to talk about it in a way that doesn't denigrate those folks, but speaks to them in a human way and gives them human characteristics, and all to explore today's perspective of yesterday. It's an honor to be able to do it. I'm glad the folks that have received it in a positive way enjoy it. I certainly enjoy doing it. And, one of the harder things when you try to make it into a TV show is there's a history to what television is and the way information is disseminated, the way stories are told. And wanting to do something that feels different is always a challenge because people want things that they can reference other things. Oh, it's just like this, or it's just like that. And Killadelphia isn't really like a lot of things on television. It's its own thing. I think it's true to genre, and it speaks to history in a very unique way. And so whatever home we find, hopefully it'll be one that will embrace that idea. I'd hate to do it in a way that becomes just like schlocky TV just for the sake of doing it.
Is it mostly pay services that it's getting shot to?
Yeah, you can't. There's no way you're gonna be able to cuss and pull off arms and do some of the stuff that's in the book in a different kind of way.
Well, like FX had The Strain, which was like kind of a weird thing to have on at that hour.
I'm really just here for Abigail Adams like going to like a like sex club. Like that's the scene that I'm waiting for. Personally, that scene is right free in my head.
You can't do that on ABC.
No, you
weirdly,
can't.
Weirdly, I want Eva Green playing her, like her or Rebecca Ferguson, who is in the Mission Impossible movies and Dr. Sleep.
Okay.
They'd be my two dream casting.
Rodney's like,
Rose. Did she play Rose?
Rose the Hat, yeah.
Yeah, Rose the Hat. Yeah. I dug her.
Yeah, she was good. She was
scary.
She was
one of the best things about that movie.
Yes.
I don't know whether I like that movie or don't like that movie, but I like her in that movie.
I watched the uncut version. It was better than the regular version.
That must have taken like a whole day of your life because the movie itself was like 2 hours.
It was pretty damn long. It was close to 3 hours.
You saw the uncut version. It's like it'd be like Snyder's Justice League cut.
Oh God! I know I'm gonna watch it. I know I'm gonna watch it though. 4 hours.
You gotta take a weekend off to watch.
Like Eva Green from Penny Dreadful. Like she can pull off that like damaged, scary.
Yeah,
she's been in some schlocky movies too.
Anybody that can
300.
suppressed anger is sort of the key to that character. I think anyone who's able to just keep it tamped down and you feel it, but when it's unleashed, it's terrifying. But it's almost like, again, going back to Lou Ferrigno, you knew that twice an episode you were gonna make him angry, and you wouldn't like him when he's angry. It's gonna happen. It's like the $6 Million Man. He was gonna run twice, and you were gonna hear that he's gonna jump. Right, you're gonna do that. And so Abigail is sort of kind of, that thing where it's in there and it's coming, but you got to.
She's got that haughtiness to her, where she's like the aristocracy, where she kind of holds herself above others.
She certainly does. She thinks a lot of herself, that Abigail.
But God, if they get Paul Giamatti to come back and play old John Adams, I would die.
That would be fun. That'd be
good.
John Adams is the vampire in the black sport coat, walking around with his black sport coat and a red shirt, red button down.
I would take Jason Statham also, just British accent.
We got to make it fat. He'd have to wear a suit, a fat suit for
that's true.
A little shorter. But
I'm gonna come down there now. I fought a shark.
You're a cool dude, Rodney. You're a cool dude, man. This has been real fun.
I appreciate it, man. Likewise. Again, I appreciate you guys. Always happy to talk about all things Killadelphia and life in general. Talking politics, don't do it very often because I don't want to fight. I hate the fight.
Yeah, I'm hesitant to do it.
I don't want. They used to say politics and religion, and I've already got high blood pressure. I probably have more days, behind me than in front of me. And I'm surrounded by stress. So to argue about something that I know isn't going to change anybody's point of view, and then why would I want to in the first place? It'd be an ego thing, if anything else. I'd rather
swimming in that water right now. I hear you.
I just keep to myself, and it's funny because certainly on Twitter and Facebook in general, you get these conversations. Like something will happen, someone will have a conversation, somebody will say something that pushes a button at me, and I want to comment, but I can't comment.
Tom King's Batman, that gets my blood pressure up.
But
that's the only comic-related one that gets my blood pressure up.
I stay out of all of it. I have my opinions, but life is too short to try to convince people to think in a different way. I think if I can do good work and somehow allow the work to speak for my sensibilities, hopefully that can conjure a good thing. And
that's art to me. That's what art means to me completely.
That was Denny O'Neil when him and Neil Adams were doing the Green Arrow, Green Lantern.
I got it over there.
His big thing was, if I can reach one smart kid and change their mindset, then I did my job.
Even the imagery, because I love those movies.
Oh yeah.
We've opened another door now of I think it was only like 8 issues because they were canceled. I think it was like
it was 8 to 10 issues. It was short.
8 to 10 issues.
It pissed people off real fast.
Every cover was like, whether it was the Jon Stewart cover, whether it's the one with the Indian, it's like there was some provocative subject, some provocative theme that they were going to tackle. And Neil Adams' art was so, revolutionary, certainly for its time.
The old man in the neighborhood, old black man going, you've helped the blue skins, you've helped the red skins on Mars. What have you done for the black man?
I get a lot of hate for telling people that Hal Jordan has some racist tendencies. They don't really care for that very often.
He's a cop. He was the authority cop.
But they dealt with so many different issues for its time. And that was sort of, even for me, that was sort of the bridge between comic books just being fun and being a little bit more thoughtful and evolving to like Miller's Daredevil and then, The Dark Knight Returns and then Gaiman and Moore and, comics becoming almost like literature. But I felt that the blessing of it for me was they sort of evolved as I got older and I was able to walk with them.
Comic code went away.
When I say about like professional wrestling, I was the biggest wrestling fan ever. And now I just can't. It just doesn't. It's not the same. And
so I hear you.
Yeah, it was like there was a time where I loved it. Like that was my weekend when it was on TNT or Turner TBS during its time. But
WCW,
the NWA and all of that, and then it became this other. It became what it is now, and it feels like just a shade of what it was for me. You know, I know a lot of for its time, right? A lot of people love it right now. God bless them. Nothing negative to say about it, but it doesn't speak to the thing that I loved about it. That felt like they were really telling stories, and it was so messy that there was something about the messiness that felt unpredictable. Now it feels incredibly exactly. Love Ric Flair. Ric Flair. I was working on a movie, Eddie, in Charlotte, North Carolina, when Ric Flair had Gold's Gym. He owned a Gold's Gym, and I left set one day because I wanted to meet Ric Flair. And I walked into Ric Flair's gym, and the first person I saw was Ric Flair. And I stood there for a moment, and I'm sure Rick is like, "Who is this giant black man standing there?" But he was cool, and he gave me a picture, and he gave me an autograph, and we did a little quick hug, and then he basically told me to get the hell out of his gym. It was one of those moments in my life that I'll never, ever forget. And I love Ric Flair, and I've had this love affair with Flair for, oh my God.
Love a Flair.
There you go. All the way through. And
I bought one of the robes.
He's problematic as well, but I love Ric Flair. If I wanted to stand up, I got an autographed picture of Flair against Hulk Hogan, like no more than 6 feet away from me, right?
Oh,
So
we've hit the 2-hour mark, so I think it's good time to wrap up. We've talked about a lot. Anything?
And Andrew wasn't here, so
I'm gonna have him watch this.
You know, if Dee had done because I got this thing for Jennifer because of all of her books, and I wanted to give me a book one day. So Dee, you would have been the one that got it because you would have knew. You know,
I'm really glad I didn't get it.
You would have been Andrew. You would have been Andrew. But Andrew and I have made up. He doesn't know it yet, but Andrew and I have made up.
I just don't think Andrew was ready for the ball busting that occurred.
Andrew, I love Andrew. Andrew and I are kindred spirit.
Anything coming up, Rodney, in the next couple of weeks, months?
I think we talked about it.
Okay.
We talked about Cloak and Dagger. There are 2 other Image books coming.
The King in Black, that would be real soon then, since that's going on.
That's March, I believe.
Okay. The trade for Killadelphia in March.
Trade for Killadelphia.
And an image first for Killadelphia.
Yes.
I think it's coming out too.
Yeah.
Several image firsts this week.
Quincredible. I'm doing the 3rd arc of Quincredible. I've got 3 other. I think I told you guys the 3 Zombie Love books. I'm looking to see if there's any more on the wall. I'm not just fading from you guys. That's about it.
The Zombie Love stuff, is that going to be available through Diamond, or is it going to be direct through Zombie Love's website?
No, it'll be Diamond. Diamond will be everywhere.
I wasn't sure if it's going to be like TKO where you got to order through them initially. Okay.
I've spent far too much money on this endeavor to just trust my ability to sell anything. I've mortgaged a small home to be able to start this thing.
Well, we'll be talking about it when they come out.
I appreciate it. Hopefully they will be to your liking and quality stuff.
Dee, what's next for you?
You guys can check me out at FTO Nerd Talk, all platforms. I just wanted to say, I ask this question on my podcast all the time. If you can say one thing to the people who's been supporting you and following you through all of this, like what would it be?
Thank you first, but also the nature of the camaraderie with being able to, people ask all the time. I send folks books sometimes, T-shirts and different things, and the people say I'm so nice and why do you do it, whatever. But there is that connective thing. They're doing something for me as much as the other way around. I really appreciate, again, just being able to have a little community to be a part of that feels good, that we're all interested in something that takes me away from the difficulty of today's world. So thank you. Would be that thing.
Right on.
Jennifer?
So you can usually find me here on Fridays, but you can find me on Comics Will Break Your Heart YouTube doing shows on Sundays, and then on Fridays I do a show with Hero and the Kid. But you can also now find me, don't forget, lurking for the hashtag Rodney Barnes for Swamp Thing, because I really want to see it. I'm gonna find you and I'm gonna send you these. We'll coordinate it. Rodney Barnes for Swamp Thing.
And Rodney will give books as well. And Rodney will sign books and mail books to people.
Man, that's so cool.
So,
Rodney Barnes for Swamp Thing. Like, let's make this happen, folks.
As always, we do a show Friday with Jen, and we do book club once a month. We are doing Ice Cream Man by W. Maxwell Prince for this month. We love it. I like the whole kind of anthology Tales from the Crypt vibe to it.
and the covers. I mean,
Yes.
the covers are
Beautiful,
always
aren't they? Good God.
Bitterroot. I think Bitterroot and Ice Cream Man are the most fun covers of anything out there.
We are working on it. He's confirmed. We just don't know the date yet. Zach Thompson, the writer of Lonely Receiver and I Breathed a Body, has agreed to come on. So I can't wait to have him on and talk about what a weird fucking book, Lonely Receiver.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And as always, thank you for giving your time to this small little channel that we have. Really appreciate you, and don't think we won't be contacting Carlos again and annoying him in the future.
By all means, anytime you guys want to talk, I will only come the next time if you have Andrew here. I need Andrew in my life. All week long, I'm thinking I get to see Andrew, and continue to build that connection that we started. And then I saw no Andrew, and for a minute I was just going to hit leave. And I decided to stay. But
I will cut this clip for him.
Yeah, but please tell Andrew, how much I've been thinking about him, and I hope Chicago's treating him well, and that he's safe.
And also, since we're mentioning Andrew, go check out his comic site, Comic Book Campaign, where you can buy single issues always at cover price, whether they get hot or not.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He's just trying to promote reading. Jen and I buy books from him all the time.
I'm going to buy books from him too.
He will probably freak out.
Yeah. I'm going to buy from Andrew, and I want Andrew to sign the book. I want him to personalize the book. Well, I'm not going to buy it. If he doesn't sign it, I want nothing to do with Andrew forever. But he has to sign it for me.
Again, we really appreciate you coming on, talking this story arc and everything else with us. Dee, also, thank you for coming on. I know you were excited to talk to Rodney after reading the first two books. I think you got hooked.
Got hooked.
Hopefully, I didn't let you down, Dee. I did my best. It's been a long day, man. But
he was nervous. He was nervous.
I was nervous, man. I'm not gonna lie. 2 weeks.
For what?
You got a name out there, man. Like, people know who you are. Like, I see Brian K. Vaughan, Spike Lee quoting your work. Like,
Weird Al Yankovic has a name. There are a lot of people with Elmer Fudd has a name. There are a lot of names that we all know, but there's never a name that conjures. My name should never conjure anxiety, unless you say I'm bringing him over for dinner. Oh shit! What's he gonna eat? It's like
I'll make sure Thanksgiving if it is.
never allow me to bring any anxiety to your life.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everybody, for viewing. And like always, take care. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Wear a mask. If you're sick, stay the fuck home.
That's a good point.
And keep buying Killadelphia and support Rodney.
Thank you very much.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Rodney Barnes for Swamp Thing.